So welcome everybody to Book Chat. I am Patricia Dubroof and I am with Assisting Hands Home Care as their Director of Community Relations. And in that role, I get to play with fun authors, and two of them are on the screen. One we're going to highlight today, and one that was highlighted just a month or so ago, Maine Hills, who wrote One Block West of the White House. And we're still waiting for the copies to be shared. So I'm sure there's going to be a book event for that coming up.
Yep.
Great. And then I wanted to mention that the reason that we do Book Chat is because I spent 35 years in a career of arts and healing, offering free medicine like this to folks around the country. And it was very successful. And when I came on board with Steve Lorberbaum at Assisting Hands Home Care, he saw the light and he said, yes, in fact, making art does make you feel better. So let's do some things that are creative. And what's more creative than reading a book or learning about a book and enjoying that time together? So we offer a few other programs every month. We offer What's Your Plan, where we talk to a leader in the industry about how to age well. And we also offer Death Cafe, which is a great conversation starter for folks who have a hard time saying the word or thinking about the concept, but we're all going to die, and why not talk about it while we're living and get over ourselves? But it's a very lively group of folks that gather, still on Zoom. All three of our programs still on Zoom. And we're going to keep it that way until folks feel like it's more fun to meet in person. At the moment, I think with everybody's schedules, it's great to just be able to pop onto a Zoom and hang out for half an hour and see where it goes. So because we have a half an hour, I don't want to take up all the time talking about my work. I want to talk to you about Angie Dobransky, who wrote a book called Life Lessons in Success. Life Lessons in Success. And I want to see, let me just make sure everybody's in. Yep, looks like it is. Good. So here she is. So Angie, welcome to Book Chat.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this since we scheduled it many months ago.
Yeah. So Angie, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up and how did you become an author? So that's a big leap, but I know I want you to do it in 2 minutes or less.
2 minutes. The long short story of my life. I grew up in Wheaton. I went to Glenmont Elementary School and Wheaton High School, if you're local. I was lucky enough at a very young age to have teachers recognize that I was an intelligent child. And so they set me off on a path to have more than where I came from, essentially. I worked my way through college with a full-time job. And then I spent 20 years working in fashion. I worked for Monet, jewelry, and Liz Claiborne. And for someone who had never traveled, that was quite a lot of fun. And then I hit a moment in life where I had a just absolute corporate crisis. That'll probably come up when we talk about the book. And I quit my job and I started my own business as a coach. And it's been a wonderful journey, but along the way, true story, probably if I'm honest, 12 years ago, I actually wrote my first book. That's been 95% done ever since. And it's been bothering me that I never got that actually completed. And then I was at a training program with some wonderful people and we started talking about writing a book. And I kind of committed to them that we would write a book together. And my commitments to others are always greater than my commitments to myself. Ergo, I am now a published author. And I realized that first book I wrote wasn't right, but I am actually about 80% done of the rewrite of that. So I will hopefully by the end of this year get another book out, if not next spring.
That's fantastic. What a great trajectory. And you should know that Angie is not only an author, but she is a world-class life coach, and her business is called Radical Success, right?
Rad Strategic.
Yes. Sorry.
Yes. Most of my clients are business owners and executives. So it's a lot of, helping them become who they need to be to lead the companies they're trying to lead. And also, a fair amount of strategy thrown along the side is actually how to do it as well.
So she's a really rad gal, and I love that about her. And she runs great networking groups, and we've just connected over the months, really.
Yeah.
And having spent time reading her book, this book is set up in very personal chapters. She does the intro and a first chapter, and then 35 other
Yep.
authors have been selected to present their chapter, but all about those life lessons. What made you a success? What crazy paths did you have to take to get to where you are today as a success? And some of them are just heart-rending stories. I mean, they're just beautiful. Some of them are very didactic. I mean, we were talking earlier, and every chapter you read, depending on where you're coming from, you read it from their perspective a little differently. There's a lot of surprises in here about who these authors are. And each author has a little bio at the end of the chapter, which is really nice as well. So you can always get in touch with them and say, hey, this is what I learned from you. Do you want to share more, or can we get together or something? So I like that it's like a live document.
I think
So
what's really interesting about the group, Patricia, is we all know each other. We share a common connection. We are friends. We didn't just randomly, end up in this book together, but we're all very different, and we're of all ages and all incomes and from all over the world. And so you get a lot of perspectives.
That's a great point. That's a really good point. So the place that you all connected originally was through Jack Canefield's coaching group.
Yes. So if you haven't heard of Jack Canfield, you have heard of Chicken Soup for the Soul, because everybody in the world has. And that's his original book. And he actually has a book that he wrote, I think it's 10 years old now, called The Success Principles. And he does trainings in what are the success principles and how to present them, how to be a better presenter on stage. Jack is masterful on stage. I've been a speaker and a coach for a long time, and I followed his work. So to do a year-long training program with him live with 50 people seemed like an opportunity. So that's how we all met each other, and that's how the book came about. We spent this year together, a lot of it virtual, but 2 weeks live. And at the end of the second live week, someone said, it was Bob Salazzo said, we should all write a book. And I was like, that's a lot of work. What if we all just wrote a chapter? Then we would have a book. And that's how it all came together.
Well, it is a successful read. It's very entertaining. I liked reading each chapter like on a different day, like, instead of binging. I was like, I want to think about what they said and how that's applicable to me or not applicable. But let's start off with your chapter. And your story is called Actions Speak Louder Than Dreams. And I always like to have the author read a little bit from the book, just so you can get a feel for her voice. So we selected a section about when you first started your business in 2007.
Okay. So I started my business in August of 2007 because it seemed like the perfect time to start a business. The market was on fire, everyone was making money, and opportunities were everywhere. I was the single mother with a teenage son with a mortgage and sole responsibility for keeping us both afloat. And I quit my salaried corporate job, bought a coaching franchise, and started my own business. I was disciplined, hardworking, and dedicated, and ready to set the world on fire as a business coach. I had real-world experience on a large scale and a coaching model that had been used to support thousands of small businesses. I never entertained any thoughts of failure.
Which is pretty impressive. That's one way to jump into a new business. I think we have some other entrepreneurs in the group who are smiling like, oh my God, she was so confident.
So confident. So confident.
You make it.
And as I'm buying the coaching franchise, they're telling me how great I'll be, right? They're like, oh, you're so fantastic. You've already used coaching as a model in your corporate career. You have all these connections. You'll be a huge success. So that's what I thought was going to happen. That is not what happened. If anybody remembers August of 2007 and then the year of 2008, it was not, in fact, the best time to start a business. It was, in fact, probably financially one of the worst times to start a business. And I mentioned to Patricia the market and money situation. at that point was very similar to where it is right now. A lot of money out there, right? And it just seemed right. But then, of course, we know the housing market crashed and it all came crashing down. And I came very close. My story, I came very close to losing literally everything that I had built throughout my life. And I turned that around. And I would tell you that my book is about failing as a coach, except I am a successful coach. So it was really just a little speed bump along the way, but it didn't feel like that at the time.
Looking back.
For sure. Yeah,
With
looking back.
perspective, it looked like a speed bump, right?
Yeah, I
Right.
might have been seeking medical attention for the amount of anxiety I had at certain points in time there. But looking back, it really was just part of the struggle, I suppose.
So one of the phrases that Catonfield uses and that you've adopted in this book as well is this E plus R equals O. So do you want to explain to the group about what that means and how that was helpful for you at that turning point?
It's really, and it's really, I live my life by it to this day. So it's event, which is the thing you can't control, right? So it's the way the world works, the weather, you know, the economy, whatever, the coronavirus, the event. And then response is your response to it. So events happen to us all the time. And every single time something happens, we get to choose how we respond. And it is our respond that brings our outcome. So that's the E plus R equals O. Event plus response equals outcome. And our outcome is really never determined by the events. It's always determined by our response. And there's two sides to this. So when I first started studying really deeply with Jack, I was like, oh yes, I can fully take responsibility for all my choices and results, which is harder than it sounds, but not that hard. But what I really came to realize, actually through some of my own son's journey, was that I'm only responsible for myself, right? I can't actually control anyone else's responses or their outcomes. And when I sort of recognize that, when I let go of trying to say, be the responder for someone else and just respond for myself and control my own outcomes, that's when I find the most happiness and success.
So when you were spinning with worry and anger and frustration at that speed bump, how did you change your response so that you could have a positive outcome?
So, you know, I mean, I was in real crisis. My bank account was almost empty. I mean, we were still eating, but I wasn't sure how I was going to pay the mortgage next month. And it really came down to me deciding that, like, I either had to admit that I failed, right? So I either just had to go, okay, it's over, I failed, let me go find a job. Or I just decided, no, I'm not going to fail. I remember having that conscious moment of going, no, I can't let this happen, you know? And there was a little bit, my son was a teenager, so there was a little bit of, I can't let this happen to my son, but I mean, he could have lived with his father. He was relatively protected. It was definitely, I can't let this happen to me. And it might've been, you know, a whole guilt about failing or whatever, but I certainly didn't want to fail. And I just decided I'm not going to fail. I'll do whatever I have to do to turn this around. And what I really did was all the actions I hadn't been taking because they scared me up to that point. But the fear of failing became greater than the fear of the actions.
That's great. That's great. Well, I love what Amy Burton quotes in the beginning of each chapter is a little quote. And she says, asking questions is one of the fundamental keys of learning. It is always better to ask a question than pretend you understand. And she attributes that to Catherine Pulsifer. So I think in this case, you were asking yourself the question, like, I don't understand why I'm failing. So let's figure this out. Like, what's wrong with this picture? How can I make it better and make it successful?
Well, and it also became this moment of making a commitment to do whatever I had to do to succeed. And, you know, a few years later, I was watching Def Leppard get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I don't know how many of you guys are heavy metal fans or even have ever heard of Def Leppard, but they were like 16 years old when they went on tour with Ozzy Osbourne, just to give you a little history of them. And so now they're 50 or 60, however, they're probably my age, late 50s. They're getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I hear them stand up and they say, you know, we were just 4 blokes from this factory town. None of us wanted that life. And at a very young age, we decided we would do whatever it took to get out of here. And that's how they became, you know, super mega rock stars. And in that moment, I decided I would do whatever it took to succeed. And so I did.
And was there one thing that you would sort of say was the pivotal thing that you did?
I picked up the phone and I made 10 cold calls every day. So it's really funny because in my corporate career, I was just on the phone all day long, right? And then when I started my own business, I developed, I'm not kidding you, a full-fledged phone paranoia. Like, not only could I not make the outgoing call, I could not pick up the phone when it rang. You know, it just became this monster of rejection for me. I actually did a mailing one time and the phone was ringing and I could see on the caller ID it was people I had mailed to. So they were clearly interested and I was unable to answer the phone. That's how bad it was. But on that day, when I realized I wasn't going to be able to pay the mortgage, I just knew you have to talk to people to close sales. And I called, 5 days a week, 10 business owners every day for a month and completely turned my business around.
That's great. Good lesson learned.
And I still don't love the cold calling, but I will do it if I need to, because it does work if you, good targeted list and you know what you're doing. So,
yeah. So tell me about your trajectory now. Where are you heading? What's in the future for Angie? What are you dreaming?
So I'm just trying to get to the beach full time. I'm further along than you might imagine. I have a house on the East Coast in Florida, and we have some land on the West Coast in Mexico. And we're going to build a house there and some casitas so we can run retreats. I have been trying to get my coaching practice to be completely virtual for a long time. And COVID was, I'm not kidding you, like a gift from heaven that said, here you go. So I can coach from anywhere, which means I can be anywhere. And so I just really want to be on the beach in Mexico and then a little bit on the beach in the US.
Sounds great. That sounds great. So that feeds me perfectly into the chapter by, what's his name? Hang on. George Brown, who said he really didn't like the word retirement. He thought that the whole structure of the word was wrong and didn't describe where he was heading next. So he said he uses the word rewirement. So he's rewiring his systems and changing his future look to be different from where he is now, but he's not stopping doing anything. There's nothing tiring about it. It's wired up and ready to do the next thing. So it sounds like you're ready for that, Angie.
I am. And it's, my husband is 70 and I'm in my late 50s. And people ask us all the time, like, when are you guys going to retire? And our answer is never, right? Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to be basking in the sun on the beach most of the time. But I mean, I truly change people's lives in ways that I didn't even know that I could. And so the idea, and it fulfills me in ways I didn't know anything could. And so the idea of stopping that seems insane. And we all know that one of the 3 secrets to aging is purpose, right? So if I can find a way to do this and fulfill my purpose from the beach in Mexico, like, that is the rest of my life. It's fantastic.
It's wonderful. I love that you're so clear, and it makes perfect sense since you're a rad coach. So that's right. Really cool. So I'm going to open it up for some questions. I'm sure some of you have some of the things that Angie's been talking about might resonate with you. Tell us about, what is your lesson for success? Wayne, you're super successful. You have any clues you want to share with us? Unmute and tell us.
No, I'm very impressed with the confidence piece in this. There was a time when I came to DC, not really knowing like if I was geographically even ready for that or the position. Came in a lesser position, and in 4 months I had the top position. Wasn't sure I was ready for it, but I thought, I'd rather be at the top than still under someone else. So I just put my mind to it that somehow I would succeed at that, and and very fortunately have. So confidence really does play a big role. You have to believe in yourself, and you figure, each day you may encounter something new that's tough or you've never encountered before, but the sun sets that evening, the sun rises the next morning. So that's kind of always been my philosophy, just to keep your eye on the ball and look for those opportunities where you can step out. And I always tell the younger people when they're trying to get ahead and they say, how do I get to this position or that? I say, always step out around all the other people that just allow you to move right around them. But you have to be the one to step around and say, I can do that. I will do that. I'll take on that task. So
even when you don't know how, sometimes I think a
Right,
lot of the
exactly.
confidence comes from, I call it fake it until you become it, right? Like
Right.
when the first time I ever took a buying trip for Woodward and Lothrop as an assistant buyer was actually the first time I'd ever been on a plane. Right. And I'm with all these other seasoned travelers and I'm terrified. Right. But I'm going to put on the uniform and I'm going to act like everything's okay. And take a little, Alka-Seltzer or something so I don't throw up. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great
I
one.
enjoyed I'll have to read your book. I'm excited to read your book.
Yeah.
The book with your chapter.
So Megan, what are you smiling about? You're resonating. I can tell.
I enjoyed. I'm about a third of the way through the book, and I really enjoyed it. I was reading the other night one of those. You wake up in the middle of the night, and it's what do I do? I guess
Right.
I'll read some. And it was like I'd finish a chapter and be like, oh, I can read the next one. I can read the next one, and it was 1:30.
3 o'clock in the morning.
Right. But I love hearing the stories. I'm in a point in my life, right, where I started a new business that's, I don't know, a year and a half old. And so hearing other people's stories and what they've used and how they have kind of pushed through those beginning years. And even every year, right, you level up, you keep challenging yourself and learning and hearing how others have done that was really neat.
So Megan is a lovely estate family law practice and came from a corporate law firm. So she's doing a very similar trajectory, Angie, as you did.
Yeah. And I started in the corporate world right in 2007. It was not the original plan, but that's what was there at that point in time.
It's an interesting transition from the corporate world to entrepreneur because it's significantly different even when you don't think it is, right? Like even being the president of a corporation that you didn't start is much different than being the president of a company that you did, right? Because this like I could sell Liz Claiborne or Juicy Couture or Donna Karen or any of the many labels we carried all day long. In fact, we were so haughty in the way that we sold. You had to prove to us you were worthy of carrying our goods before we'd even take your call, right? And now nobody wants to take my call because they don't know who I am, right? Right? And it was quite a shock for a while. I know that's where the phone paranoia came from.
Sure. Well, as an artist, you can imagine the numbers of rejection letters that you get as a young artist in the gallery world is huge compared to the acceptances. So you get kind of a thick skin. Phyllis, did you want to chime in? Any thoughts on today's discussion?
Well, thank you so very much for inviting me, Pat. Thank you so much. And I greatly enjoyed the story and the sharing. I think definitely the confidence is essential. And as I think about myself, I think, just also the hard work ethic and being willing to put more in than requested or needed. I think that, is probably a trait that most of us share as well, really willing to work hard to advance yourself and advance the company's mission. Myself, I've worked in the nonprofit arena for the past 20 plus years, 25 plus years, but also it's an opportunity to really learn a lot and do a lot, and I really enjoyed that. And but all the things that she spoke of are things that I've embraced in my career as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Phyllis. Phyllis is a wonderful advocate for adults with challenges, living with challenges of all kinds.
Phyllis, the habit of doing more than paid is one of Napoleon Hill's original 16 laws of success, right? You kind of hit that nail right on the head. And Dwayne, you alluded to it as well. Like if you really want to succeed, just doing what everybody else is doing isn't quite enough, or just doing exactly what's expected of you isn't quite enough. It's those who step out a little bit or do a little bit more that actually end up with much greater success.
Well, that's a great way to close this discussion. That was beautifully said. Thank you, Angie. I want to make sure everybody can see that we have Angie's contact information. If you need it again later, you can always contact me. And we have recorded this session, and my editor will clean it up, and we'll have it on our website in a couple of weeks. And we'll send out a little reminder to everybody that you can share this with other friends and family and say, look, I just enjoyed chatting with Angie on Book Chat. That's what we do. So our next book chat is going to be with Carol Binta, Carol Nadeem Binta. She wrote a book several years ago called Civilized Blacks. And it is a fabulous historical novel that tracks a family and friends of African Americans in America who were doing well. And in the early days, pre and post Civil War, and what that looked like and how they were educated and where they went from there. It's quite interesting. So it will be a different story, but it will be the same show, Book Chat, with me and Assisting Hands Home Care. So thanks for coming out today. And again, really appreciate Angie's time. Dwayne, Megan, Phyllis, Renee, thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next time.